playing frickin' Mario Duck Hunt.
Raw Endymion in like a giant litter box.
Everybody shits.
Movies.
He's stuck in a cat prison. That's the most ham-fisted bullshit ever.
All the scumbags in charge.
Grandfather. Cobra La-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Floating shitter platform.
Cypenus.
Tree World.
He's a well-educated hick.
Broadcasting live from inside the power band. This is The Blah. In this episode, everybody dies. I'm your host, the Wolverine, along with my super cool friends, Zarhigo.
Hi.
And Orange Sassy Squirrel.
What's up?
Welcome to the podcast, folks. This week we are continuing our book club series and talking about book 3 of the Dan Simmons epic, Endymion. The name of the series is the Hyperion Cantos, and we're going to be talking about that today. Of course, Dan Simmons is the brother of Gene and Richard Simmons.
True that.
And this is a very popular science fiction series that we all love, and hopefully you've been following along. Let's get to it.
I kind of want to go in and change his Wikipedia entry to say that he is the brother of those two, just because I think it'd be funny.
Yes, that would be excellent. Excellent work.
What a family.
Right?
Family.
Super successful bunch, the Simmons peoples.
Yeah. The Simmonses.
The Simmonses.
God, all of them, man. To the books, the home videos, the
fro,
rock bands,
short shorts,
the lunch boxes,
the tongue,
the tongue, the makeup.
The tongue.
They got it going on.
I wonder if that's where Kiss got the idea for the makeup, because when they were all growing up together, they used to wear makeup, like, you know, around the dinner table to...
I think that Brother Gene's makeup is the inspiration for the Shrike. That's what I think.
Whoa. Meta, Chad. Very meta.
All kinds of spikes.
Definitely in his armor from like the Destroyer album.
Yeah.
It's totally shrikey.
Definitely inspiration for the Shrike, yes.
And all the blood, the blood vomiting.
Oh, totally.
Total Shrike.
All the way Shrike. As far as this book goes, I like that the 4 books are kind of split into 2 giant books, and this is the beginning of the second tale, so it's kind of a different thing, although it takes place in the same universe. And I don't know, just another great book from a great series, and another great example of setting up the premise and main character. This is just an awesome book.
Excellent. Yes, absolutely excellent. And really just, I mean, super exciting. For me, when I read it, I remember getting through Fall of Hyperion and being like, wow, that was just incredible. Not having any idea that these books existed. So when I found Endymion, I was over the moon. And then to dive back into that world many hundreds of years later, because this book now takes place 200 plus years in the future from the fall of the hegemony of man. It was very, very exciting. So let's pick our way through it.
Sure. Just to chuck in a quick synopsis, the book is about a new character, Endymion, who's tasked by one of the old school pilgrims to save the empathy character that was mentioned in the second book. And essentially like a long Huckleberry Finn-like journey ensues with a big bad church that's come to be the dominant factor in the universe post-fall of man. And it's a really interesting mix of multi-planet journeys and a band of misfits, and it's worth digging into this one. It's an interesting book.
Benny, any thoughts?
So, Kev, you loaned me, I think, all 4 of the books at once. So I knew there was more coming, and I was psyched when I started. I was kind of at the end of Fall of Hyperion. I was like, okay, where's it going to go after this? So I was interested to see that Endymion was going to cover the story of the one who, what is it? The one who
teaches.
The one who teaches.
The one who teaches, yeah. And the sort of, empathy being that the Technicore was going after.
Yeah, I kind of had forgotten a little bit about the empathy being component, but I went back and listened to our episode on Fall of Hyperion, and yeah, it's an interesting shift.
So the whole part about the empathy component that they talk about in Fall of Hyperion, a lot of that stuff, when he's talking about that with Uman and all of that, it's very easy to dismiss it because there's so much so many other things going on. Like literally the end of the world is happening, and the Farcasters are about to be destroyed and all of this sort of thing. So I remember for me going through all these, the first couple of times, it's like I completely forgot about the empathy component. So it was surprising and fresh when I got into these stories. And I was not expecting this story to take place 200 years in the future. And when I remember first reading that and being like, wow, okay, now where is this going,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. So the opening of the book is the main character is stuck in a cat prison. He's writing his cat prison. That's funny. He's stuck in a Schrodinger's cat box prison and writing a journal of his memoirs. But I just love the idea of a Schrodinger's cat prison, which is essentially, a little capsule in space orbiting that has the Schrodinger's cat style poison capsule that at some point in time is going to kill the poor bastard. And he's just like floating around boo-hooing and like crying into his journal while feeding it back into the recycler. And I just think it's really funny.
Chad, every time you say cat box, I picture Rawl and Endymion in like a giant litter
like
box.
a litter box.
Yeah, me too.
Just like scratching his hand and yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I've just been watching some old Ren and Stimpies, so.
There you go. Space madness.
Doubly so. No, gritty kitty litter, man.
There you go. So the memoirs start with this hunt, and it's essentially setting up the state of affairs 250 plus whatever years in the future, where the church is now in charge of, the former hegemony, and anyone who's part of the church has these cruciforms that were discussed in the other books, and they're immortal. So, Rawl is not immortal, and these immortal kind of douchebags come for the hunt and start shooting things up and risk him and his dog's life, and the dog dies, and he just John Wicks out on these jerky rich dudes. And it just like is a really action-y way to kind of kick things into gear, and it also like sets the tone quickly and sets him as an outsider quickly, and I just really appreciated it.
And sets up his sort of role in the whole thing. I mean, I feel kind of stupid saying it like this because it's kind of over obvious, but it kicks off like many of the series of events that come.
Yeah. The fact that he chooses not to take the cruciform and just get executed and like have a true death, and like, yeah, it really sets the stage for him too. Yeah, definitely. It's a good point.
All right. So at this point, let's just explain the cruciforms, because this was, and again, to Dan Simmons' writing, like it was such a cool thing in the very first book. And then, we just get totally away from that and they never really mention it again. So I remember when I started reading this, I was like, wow, the cruciforms. That's what the Bikura were wearing in the very first story, the priest's tale in the Hyperion Cantos. So now we're living in a world where the church is the dominant religion for mankind, whereas in the first two books, it was on its way out. It was a dying flame. And everybody wears...
It's the Catholic Church, too, by the way.
Sorry, the Catholic Church, you're right. Everybody wears one of these cruciforms, and they're not eunuchs, and they're not, mentally degraded like the Bikura, and they all can be resurrected if they die. And our hero, Rawl Endymion, has not accepted the cruciform. So he is just a normal human. And that is where the disparity comes in here in the beginning. So in order to be resurrected with a cruciform, you have to take the sacrament of the resurrection, and it has to be administered by a priest of the Catholic Church.
And then don't you have to like do a whole life of like service or something? Like you're going, essentially like indentured servitude for a full lifetime, and then you can come back or something. That was like kind of mentioned at some point early on.
Yeah, I do remember that, because the priest is like, what's one lifetime of servitude if you are immortal, But nothing else is ever said about it in the book, as far as I know. So,
and I don't remember that, actually. So I don't know.
It's almost like an idea he had that he forgot about.
Yeah, maybe.
And it could be that was just that your punishment if you committed a crime as such.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And you were given the opportunity to take so
that's what it is.
The out being, if you take the cruciform and join the church and do one lifetime of servitude, then
that's your prison sentence, basically.
Yeah, your debt to society will be erased,
right.
Or whatever.
That makes sense. But yeah, so Rawl is offered that immortality, and he's just like, nah, fuck you, man. It's just like, all right, cool. This is going to be a short book.
Right, because he grew up, in a nomadic sort of clan, like out in the woods, essentially. I mean, they're essentially kind of mountain people to a degree, and he's just all about being in nature, and he's not interested in any of that. So Very interesting juxtaposition there, straight off the bang. So he gets queued up to be killed via death wand.
And is like in his head being like, I wonder what it feels like to die by death wand. And then he's like, oh, it doesn't feel that bad. And then he wakes up in another spot. You're just like, oh, okay. The old switcheroo.
The old switcheroo. I think originally I thought that he was going to die or something and then end up in the cat box right away.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if Chad mentioned this, but the cat box part is he's describing that and explaining that from a point in the future that we have not gotten to yet.
Right. Yeah.
And then,
good point.
You know, the beginning of this story here with the duck hunt is him telling the story.
Beginning the tale.
Yeah. So he wakes up in a mysterious place. It's somewhat of an old castle made out of stone, literally. And of course, I started immediately think, you know, City of Poets, whatever, from the first two books. And that he's met by an android, another blue android, which we first encountered in the first book when the pilgrims were going up on the Shrike pilgrimage. And then he's taken to this room with this, as he describes, very mummy-like human being laying in this sort of floating medical chair. And it turns out that it's the old poet, Martin Silenus.
Which gets us back into more
familiar territory.
Yeah.
And absolutely blew my mind when I first read it.
Yeah, same. And I liked that it kind of, you know, you get your random intro, new character thing, and then like familiar ground, and then it kind of kicks into, you know,
unfamiliar again. Yeah.
Yeah, but it also kind of blends in with the previous books, with the dinner conversation where they sit down and, you know, Silenus essentially pitches the Rawl, you can be the hero. I need you to help me do this, that, and the other. And it's another tidy way to do some exposition and kind of get the ball rolling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Despite the fact that this takes place 200 years in the future after the first books, they did a really nice job of tying it all together and not making it feel like it's, you know how much I love time jumps, guys. But this is in book form, it's a different story, of course. And despite that huge amount of time having gone by, everything weaves together very nicely.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a high level thought. We'll move on from there.
Well said. So the person in the chair, as I said, is Martin Silenus, which blew my mind. And, you know, it turns out that he's the one that orchestrated this whole thing to fake Rawl's death and bring him to this castle where he's somewhat hiding with his android servants. And he presents this quest to Rawl. And in the process of that, he asks him why he never took the sacrament of the crucifixion and why he just chose to die. It's interesting because he's seemingly kind of one of the very few people that has taken the sacrament of the crucifixion in this world of the Pax, which is the controlling body in this future era. And I think his reasoning for that is sort of Silenus kind of testing his character and, you know, in selecting him as this person to go on this quest to protect the one who teaches. And I also think it's a good time to kind of maybe flesh out the Pax a little bit and Catholicism and that whole thing. You guys want to do that?
I definitely found the Pax a really interesting component of this whole story. I mean, it makes sense to have a big bad kind of bureaucracy, et cetera, but I love that they took a fledgling, beat-up, about-to-die church from the first couple of books and then turned it into a juggernaut by giving them essentially like an immortality device, which of course would lead to them being all-powerful. And so just the whole societal structure that comes out of it and the fact that it's tied to, you know, popes and Catholicism is a super interesting component for sure.
Yeah, definitely. As somebody who was raised Catholic and is a confirmed Catholic but a non-practicing, that aspect always kind of hit home, of course.
Did it hit home in the sense of like your upbringing in the fact that like I'm not Catholic, but I was raised Protestant or whatever, so like I'm aware of, you know, Christianity obviously and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of always got the vibe that my Catholic family members were coming at it from a little bit more of a like the church has a quite a harsh kind of, I don't know, structure maybe, like they were really like focusing on like the punishment and sinning and don't fuck up and like you really need to take this seriously or you're going to burn in hell kind of stuff, where like other forms of Christianity are a little bit less hardcore and stuff. Did that kind of resonate with this, or am I just kind of talking out of my ass?
Yeah, they all have that, but Catholic guilt is a real thing. We're I think are led to believe that we're flawed by design, and there's definitely an element of you're not I mean, it's kind of a component of all Christianity. I think that you're born a sinner.
Yeah.
But, in Catholicism, you have confession where, you have to go into a little booth and tell a priest all the shit you did wrong. And, there's just these elements of it that are kind of creepy and I don't know. It never resonated with me as a kid. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then the masses are like this weird, sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, kneel sort of aerobic workout that the Shrike might be into. Hey guys, I just went to mass with Cardinal Lord Asani, and I got a really great workout there,
dude. So making the packs like the big bad worked for you because of that history, or kind of where did it hit?
Yeah, I mean, the Catholic Church has undoubtedly done some good in the world, but it's also been responsible for a lot of, directly responsible for a lot of war and the Inquisition, and even spanning in today where you have awful terrible people that have become priests that abuse children and are sheltered from persecution by the church. So it's always kind of, it's got a double-edged sort of thing to it, and I mean, for me, what I got out of it growing up was the people that went to the church, the community was great, and there wasn't any funky business going on in my church that I'm aware of. At least nothing happened to me. So it wasn't that kind of bad, but just in general, the idea of the religion and the all that fear and guilt that is instilled in you at a very young age, I don't think is very good for people.
Sure.
So seeing that sort of continued into the deep future, because not much has really changed outside of the sacrament of the cruciform, and which I suppose is similar to like communion, where the priest, turns I'm losing the terminology here, but anyway, I think I can leave it at it's not much has changed there.
Yeah, but they were reinvigorated with essentially like the ultimate technology of immortality. So they went from a fledgling thing that had kind of fallen to the wayside back up to a major, empire.
Religious player, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the cruciform is some futuristic, modern, updated version of the Eucharist, where it's like, when you take communion and you take the Eucharist, it's like you're supposed to be taking, Jesus literally into your, like literal Jesus into your body, whereas this is a similar thing that you're taking into your body, but that gives you, everlasting life, like heaven in reality, sort of, instead of dying and going to heaven, I guess. So it's not surprising. It seems
right.
It seems to fit. So Dan Simmons was very clever there.
No, he was definitely clever in the way they knit it all together. I think that my quick reaction, not having grown up Catholic, but having grown up around a ton of Catholics, even going to a Catholic school for a couple of years and watching what that guilt does to people, it's pretty awful. And so when I read that, it was the Catholic Church was sort of the main it becomes the main antagonist, but it is like the governing body over 200 worlds. I was like, wow, this is scary. That was my initial reaction when I read it.
Fair enough. Well, I think it raises a good point where, like, one of the kind of things that I've always thought about in terms of religion is, organized religions in general make a large amount of sense in a pre-printing press, pre-literacy world through, the transition from pre-literacy to literacy, where, like, it's a way to establish a power structure,
Right.
And this is a meditation on a reinvigoration of that power structure, just in a different context. And I think, the same pitfalls are there with the whole like heavy bureaucracy and the corruption that comes from that, which is kind of indicated by the duck hunters, lying and saying that Rawl murdered them without any cause. And, it sets up kind of some of the church mechanisms in terms of the piousness and guilt. And I think, one of the other main characters, Destroyer, who's a father captain, which is a super interesting name for like a
very
crusader, essentially, is blowing up orbital forests. And so like it sets the tone real quickly that you have like a traditional religious bureaucracy that's it's kind of like snapping your fingers and taking the old like Holy Roman Empire or whatever you might call it, or like the old school Crusade era church, and just teleporting them into the future and giving them spaceships. And it's super interesting. It's a really interesting idea. But it's also, like you said, it's super terrifying. Like, it's scary as fuck.
It is super terrifying. And I think what makes it even more terrifying, Chad, is just what you said. It's like they've just basically transposed what was happening in the Middle Ages into the future. And that makes it scarier.
Yeah, totally. It's just an interesting fictional kind of pushing of the boundaries of kind of what it would mean for that structure to come back again in a different context.
Right. And I think what's even more interesting is that the book, and through Ania and her whole journey, kind of supposes that religion, spirituality, humanity, all of these things need to evolve. Like stagnation is not a good thing. And we commented in the last episode about the fall of Hyperion about how the society was essentially the same society as it is now, just with more expensive toys so they could still act like even bigger douchebags,
right.
So it's like, I think that what she is supposing is that, the whole of it needs to evolve. Religion, spirituality, and humanity itself. And that's sort of the kind of interesting juxtaposition of the book and the Catholicism and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it very much mirrors what is happening literally now, again.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. So with the religious context kind of sorted and kind of a description of the packs and all that kind of power structure stuff sorted, we end up back at dinner, which I'm picturing kind of the Nothing But Trouble hot dog choo-choo train sequence. So that's really what I've got in mind here.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, that does kind of fit, man. With the penis nose. Yeah.
That fits very well. Yeah.
Yeah, side penis. Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at with it. But
there you go. I like it.
He sets
nice tie-in.
Yeah, you like that? He sets it up where he's giving Rawl the offer of being a hero in the literary sense, and the rescue of a young girl from a 30,000 person strong army that no military in the world could get past, and then telling him he has to do all these impossible things while he basically is like laughing in Salinas' face with the absurdity of it.
Yeah,
is what kicks us off. And I love that scene where Salinas is just like, and then you need to destroy the packs, and then you need to destroy the packs. Yes. He's like, oh, anything else, man? Like, what else do you want me to do? It's a great little...
And Salinas just keeps going. I want you to kill the Shrike, and I want you to do...
Yeah, it's like, oh, that, okay, yep. Let me just get my notepad, all right, and then you want me to do what now? It's super funny. I love that.
No, and that's what he does. He says, I was pretending to write in the air on a notepad.
Oh, okay,
it's cool. One of my favorite scenes, too. It's one of the best parts of the entire thing is that he's rattling off this list of just absolutely impossible tasks.
Yeah. And it doesn't give any of it away. Like, you end up in the next couple of chapters after this getting into what happens and the rescue, which, we don't need to spend a ton of time on, but I like how absurd it is to be sitting across the table from the author essentially doing exposition to tell you about what needs to happen and the stakes are just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
So funny.
I liked Salinas' little musing about, like, he asks Rawl where he gets his haircut. He's like, I always wondered where a mythical hero would get their haircut, and that whole little that little story, that little idea in there. I thought that was really cool.
The fact that heroes are humans too, kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
As one of my favorite moments in my entire life, this girl that I went to high school with, the really nice girl, was being kind of like hoity-toity snootied out by like the snobby girls at a beach party, and she's like, you know what? You think you're better than me? You think you're this hot shit? You're all the cool girls? Well, everybody shits. Everybody shits. It's like, you shit, I shit, everybody shits. And I just like, it's seared to my memory as one of my favorite things I've ever heard. It was so good.
Yeah.
So heroes get the haircut too, Benny.
Salinas could get the same idea across by asking Rawl what brand of toilet paper he uses.
Yeah, exactly.
I always wondered what brand of toilet paper a hero uses,
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's like those are the things you never see in the movies, which is great.
what, people
You never
pooping?
see. No, you never see anybody like, a lot of times you don't see anybody stopping to eat. They don't stop to go to the bathroom. Oh, I got to take a quick shower. Like, I got to do my laundry.
Or it's like the sex scene thing where like, there's a sex scene and there's no cleanup afterwards kind of thing. Like it's just like the movies are so unrealistic, God damn it. So we kind of blew past oh my god, that was the best pun ever. We kind of blew past the android.
That was great.
I think we should take a minute to talk about Abatic the android from the first couple of books.
Yeah, because he very surprisingly makes an appearance here.
Yeah.
Which I was absolutely not expecting. So listen up. Here's a story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. And all day and all night and everything he sees is just blue. Like him, inside and out, blue his house and a blue little window.
I'm blue, da ba dee da ba da da ba dee da ba da.
That's fucking amazing. I love it. I did not see that coming, and I love you for it. Best worst song ever. I suppose what I liked the most about Bedek was his chat with Rawl, where he basically says he wants to come along on the journey, and then, Salinas is throwing down all these demands, and Rawl's like, yeah, I'll do it, but I only have one demand. It's I'll take him with me, and Salinas is super pissed about it, but that's where, where it starts. Yeah.
I love how he flips out. Yeah, he just flips out. What else do you want? My hover chair? My teeth?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Cypenus.
I was blown away that it was Abatic from the barge in the first story. I don't know. I guess I'm just amazed, and I love the way that Dan Simmons writes and the way he weaves these pieces of these stories together. And he'll take something that you just was so incidental that you just completely forgot about because it seemed not even worth remembering. And then all of a sudden he brings it back and it's like a major point in the story. So
they're a talented family, those Simmonses.
I know. They're so creative, man.
Really are.
If only Gene had been able to do the soundtrack for this book.
Hey, man.
The audiobook, rather.
One day we'll do the radio drama and have Kiss as the, it'd be like, Flash Gordon.
And when they're like in the big Shrike fights, we can use I Was Made for Loving You, kind of like they did in Umbrella Academy. That'd be perfect.
There you go.
Ooh,
Right, Benny?
love it.
Just quickly for anybody that may not have read it all, like we haven't really even talked about Ania or who she is, because at this point we don't know who she is. So when Silenus starts talking about her, she's the daughter of Bron Lamia and the Keats Cybrid, Johnny, the original Cybrid.
Yeah,
and
yes.
she was raised after the fall on Hyperion, and then she entered the time tombs and was transported 200 plus years into the future. So she walked into the tombs. I think she spent either a couple of hours or a handful of days there in the future, and then she came out, and that's what Silenus is talking about when he's asking Rawl to rescue the girl and then overthrow the Pax, find out what the Technicorp's up to, and then, he wants to see old Earth before he dies because he's like 1,000 years old. So
And kill the Shrike.
that's who Ania is, and that brings us to the next part, which I think you were just jumping into.
Yeah. So Rawl agrees and goes off to save the girl, and in the process he's given the old Hawking Mat flying carpet. I can show you the world as the way to get past these 30,000 troops. And it turns out that old Salinas is like spelunked into the underground caverns and figured out a secret route. And so this poor bastard is going 300 kilometers an hour underground in the dark on a fucking flying carpet and just pops out in a dust storm to the Shrike, like fucking doing a huge murder workout.
Slaughtering.
This is like a massive aerobics murder workout where he kills basically all of those troops. And the girl is saved. And so it's kind of like a quick synopsis of what happens, but it's essentially like at that point that the story kicks into gear and we meet this like savior, one who teaches, who's just this like little 11-year-old girl, So it's just it's kind of a wild a kind of a wild ride up until now, where you're kind of trying to find your feet, just like we're trying to find our feet with this particular episode, and
because we're like slipping off the edge of the cliff.
Exactly. And so now they're flying around on a magic carpet. They get picked up by Blue Baba D and his blue spaceship, and they shoot out and begin the story. And so you end up with Raul, Ania, and the android trying to save the universe, essentially.
Yeah, that's the setup. And we didn't mention that, the ship that Mr. Blue is flying is the console's ship from the original story. And just a quick side note on that, I really like when Raul is kind of exploring the castle and the area around where Silenus lives, and he discovers the ship, quite by accident, kind of concealed in the stone tower.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the relationship with the ship between the human characters is interesting. And I thought it was interesting how he met the ship and the conversation that he had in the beginning with the ship.
Definitely.
It was very cool. And he, because here's Raul, who's basically raised in the wild. He's not a cruciform person. He's not a technology person. This is a guy that loves being out in the woods, right? And
he's a well-educated hick.
He is. He's a well-educated. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that people that live like that aren't well-educated. He's
no, but he you know what I'm saying.
It's a street smarts thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But he's also when he starts talking to the ship, he treats the ship like another entity, and he's very polite, and he speaks to the ship like he would be talking to another human being. And I enjoyed that part, and I thought. Even when he leaves, he says, "It was really nice to meet you, and it was nice talking to you," which I thought was really interesting and cool, And later on, he kind of gets his attitude towards the ship changes, but it was important to point that out, and the fact that the ship they're flying is the console's private ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are our that's sort of our tripod tying us back to the first books as the ship and Silenus and Abetic.
Right. And we've also, this is where we get introduced to Father Captain Destroyer, who Chad already mentioned, which is the Father Captain who's been put in charge by the Pax to, quote, rescue the child and bring her back to Pacham because she's carrying a, quote, virus.
Yeah. It's the most ham-fisted bullshit ever. But of course, if your bosses are telling you, you just believe it.
Oh, my God. The bullshit is so deep.
But Destroyer is awesome. I love Destroyer. It's such a clever move to have a good guy in a bad system, have a, relatable enough religious person in this kind of huge bureaucracy. And throughout you kind of understand his change of heart and kind of his frustrations, and you just see all this stuff through his eyes, and it's a really interesting way to view the problem. I really, really liked his character a lot.
Absolutely.
I agree. Great segue to talk about a great character, yeah.
And not the only one. There's Father Glaucus as well, who is very, in this book anyways, who is, I'll jump back really quick to, that I had mentioned that the people in the church were good, but the church organization at large, I think, is not good. So.
And you could even zoom out a little bit further and say many, if not most, larger organizations inherently become too large to function without corruption. So, regardless of context, the people tend to be good, but the systems themselves tend to get really fucked up. So,
yeah, for sure.
I totally agree. And I think that, I was going to say something similar to what Ben said, Glaucus, Destroyer, Gregorius as well. Those are the people that really hold the whole thing up in terms of hold up the church. They're doing literally what they've been told to do. Literally. They're taking it literally, and they're actually doing it. Opposed to the power structure in the church, which is just doing the opposite of what they're telling everybody to do. They're horrible, and they're just doing horrible things, and they're, trying to capture this girl and using all this propaganda to get her. But Destroyer is great because he is so convictious. Is that a word?
Nope, but I like it.
It is now.
I know, I like it too. He's so convictious, and his command of the tenets of the church and the religion itself are so good. He knows how to follow it, and he knows how to follow the moral compass as set by the church. That's what I love about him.
Mm.
Whenever he's doing something that's sort of antithetical to the moral compass part, he says that, he thinks that, we know that, like when they're killing ousters in the beginning, and then later on there's a similar sort of thing that goes on, and they're questioning it. They're like, this doesn't feel right, and I think that's part of the beauty of Destroyer is that, like one of you just said, he's a great guy. He's a really good guy tasked with doing something very sort of sinister, I guess.
Yeah, or at least morally questionable in the beginning when we don't have much info.
Yeah, definitely morally questionable and under false pretenses as well. I mean, Cardinal Mordesani is saying, you got to go and get the girl, and she's evil, and she's got a virus, and all that. He's like, okay. It's like, that's not really the case.
Yeah, they definitely have the wool pulled over his eyes, or the fact that they, capture her and bring her here so we can give her the cruciform. It's not her. She's an innocent child. We don't want to hurt her. We don't want to harm her. They fill his head with all of this stuff when the reality of the situation is quite much more sinister.
Sure. But because he's trusting, it's an interesting kind of exploration of what happens when a trusting, pious person gets their belief system really pulled out from underneath them by that shitty bureaucracy. So he's a great character all around. I love the guy.
Awesome. Couldn't have put a better person in that role in the story.
And then you chuck some cool tech into it where he's out in the middle of nowhere with three ships named after the three kings from the Bible, and all of a sudden this like messenger ship comes in that turns out like blasts off at such a high rate of speed that anyone inside becomes raspberry jam and then gets reconstructed. And these Archangel ships, man.
I hate raspberry.
We've been jammed, sir. But the Archangel ships are so cool, man. I love the idea of them. It's such an interesting, unfair advantage that a society that has that immortality would be able to do. Just fire a ship at 10 times the speed of anybody else's ship and just put the people back together over the course of a few days when they arrive.
The Gideon drive is what you're talking about. I think it's also so brutal, It's inelegant and it's brutal. It's like they're like, we want to go fast, so we've got the cruciform, so the people will just die and we'll resurrect them,
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
It's just, I'll leave it at that. It is. It's disgusting. It's brutal. It's inelegant.
The fact that they're basically sitting in a thing that just collects all of the liquid that's left over, like,
It's gross.
It's perverse. The fact that they, resurrection is supposed to be like a sacrament, and it's supposed to be delivered by a priest, and all this ceremony is supposed to be around it, and they invent these ships where they're basically being resurrected by a machine. So it's the church going against its own tenets to get what it desires, and it's just very perverse.
Oh, it's so perverse. It's like Ben. It's like it's like in the political landscape. It's like now you have people doing these nefarious things, and then they just change the law to fit what they're doing to make it not illegal. Like it's
not about morality anymore.
It's not. It's just so backwards, man. And that's it's exactly the same thing as what you're talking about, Ben.
Yeah, you go from having a moral system to being, what's moral is whatever suits us.
Yeah, what's moral is whatever the people in power say is moral. Yeah.
I was just going to say, seeing somebody, a decent human being like Father Captain Destroyer, go through that over and over and over, it's just really, it's disturbing,
When he talks about when he fails on Renaissance to capture the girl for the third time, and he goes in front of the tribunal, and they're like, slap on the hand, you're good, here's your papal disky, you have absolute authority in carrying out this mission. And he's like, okay. And again, this is like the convictious Destroyer. He's like, I've already mapped out, however many worlds it was, like 200 worlds. We're going to start immediately going to all of these worlds to see if we can find the girl. And like everybody in the room is like jaw on the floor, even like all the scumbags in charge at the highest levels, because they know that he's going to have to die 200 times to achieve that goal.
And that he does it unquestioningly. They're just like, oh, wow, okay, this guy really is believing in the shit we're spouting.
Yeah, right. He actually gets it. And we're just a bunch of fat scumbags.
Yeah, exactly.
The capture of Ania and the rescue of Ania is also where we're introduced to Sergeant Gregorius, Corporal Key, and Corporal Rettig, who are three Swiss Guard troopers that Destroyer he kind of
adopts in the aftermath of the Hyperion debacle.
yeah, that's not the word I was looking for, but yeah, he just kind of commandeers them essentially, and is like, "You're coming with me, okay."
They need to move quick.
Those are three great characters that are very similar to him in moral compass and belief and all of that stuff. They're sort of perfect to complement him on the journey as that particular faction in the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to say.
I don't think it's worth digging into, but one of the only notes I really had tying up kind of the thoughts I have on Destroyer was how, I guess, maybe moved I was by his first death in the Archangel flight, and just like, it was just such a fantastic way to put the reader in the shoes of a person who is about to go through that, and then the aftermath of being brought back to life on Pacham and him being like raw skin, all of his senses are really hypersensitive, and he's like uncontrollably weeping because he doesn't have control over his emotions and his brain function, and it just really sets the stage and really like it sets him up as a pious character, but it also really makes it really clear just how hard and painful and brutal and remarkable the whole technology is. So I just really dug that.
No, that's a great point. And it's also, it's very similar to the Cassad part on the hospital ship that I went on about in the first book. It's very, very similar, actually. It's great descriptive writing from Dan because, he talks about the broth and the kindliness of the resurrection chaplain making him feel overwhelmed with emotion and joy and compassion. And like you said, Chad, you're there. You're feeling it, man. Like every little detail he's describing. And it's great how he expounded on that little part to really kind of give you a window into what the resurrection was like.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Really, really good stuff. So I found the other thing that I found interesting about Destroyer before we move on was that, he starts having these dreams. And in the dream, Ania is his daughter. What did you guys make of that? I thought that was very interesting because Ania has dreams, and that's how she sort of gets her predictions about how various different things are going to go in their journey forward. And then he's having these dreams where she is his daughter. I found that very interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Benny?
It's definitely interesting. There is sort of, there is sort of that kind of relationship between them, right? Destroyer is trying to find her so that he can bring her to the church, and he essentially thinks he's saving her, right?
Yes,
it's almost kind of like a similar thing with Saul Weintraub and Rachel. Like there's this. Well, I mean, literally, like, Saul Weintraub was having dreams about, sacrificing his daughter to God. So,
right. And the eyes and all of that.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar scenario. But they are, because of the relationship that they have, where he's trying to find her and, she's trying to get away. But there's no hatred between them. There's no animosity. They're both just trying to do what they're trying to do. Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with that, but
no, I know where you're going. Yeah.
There's a significant relationship between those characters.
And dare I say even a caring, Ben.
Definitely.
Certainly develops,
straight away almost because of his perception of the situation. Like you said, he's going in, he thinks she needs to be saved literally. So he's like, he's like very much trying to care for her.
Yeah.
And her being who she is, this evolved, enlightened being, she doesn't take it negatively, seemingly either.
I don't know if she like consciously connects with Destroyer early in the story. I think, towards the end of this book, for example, when Destroyer helps them, it would become more clear to Ania that he was potentially an ally versus an adversary. But I do kind of feel like the dream stuff, while not explained early, kind of hints at the fact that the two characters are fated to have kind of an entwined, fate, and it does hint towards the end of the book about, I think it was like a conversation on Pacham with some of the leadership, like maybe the Pope or Lord Asami or something, saying that like, we can't pull him off of this. He's the one that in all the simulations is the most likely to capture Ania. So Like even the church is aware that the two of them are entwined in some way, even though they don't know what it is. And so I kind of feel like that dream stuff was a way to kind of put a bit of weight behind that idea. I don't know. That was kind of how I took it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that that's sort of where I was going with that. Is it a good time to talk about Ania?
Yeah, probably. I don't know what my first reaction to Ania was. First of all, I would say that I've always called her Aina, which is hilarious. And every time I mispronounce somebody in this, I should probably log a death. But listening to the audiobook, I was quite corrected on pretty much everything. I would love to go back and kind of get a first impression of Ania. Now, after having read this a half a dozen times at least, I feel like they do a good job of walking the tightrope of her being an innocent / young character who doesn't know the extent of her future powers or future, kind of messiahhood. And I think that if the character of Ania was powerful from the get-go and not developing as a person into her powers, I think it would have been a big disservice. And I kind of get like a Dalai Lama vibe kind of in terms of kind of the direction she'll end up, but she's still like the kid Dalai Lama, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say there's a really good balance of innocence and like wisdom,
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely pulls out some gems. Yeah, for sure.
You're also talking about somebody that, in many ways is hyper intelligent and was having conversations with her father, who was existing in the Schrone loop in Braun's head while she was in her mother's belly.
Yes.
So she's already way ahead of the curve. It's sort of stupid to say that because she is essentially a cybrid herself in the sense that she's a hybrid of a human and a cybrid,
I never thought about this before, but there's like a serious parallel between Ania and Alia from the Dune books.
I was literally just about to say that. I love it. Yeah, exactly.
What? All right, lay it out.
Just like being awoken in the womb, like
right.
Alia Atreides was awoken in the spice trance by Jessica, and it's very similar, although the outcomes are potentially different.
Huh. Wow. I never would have thought of that. You guys know that material better than I do.
That's a Lady Jessica takes the water of life while she's pregnant with Alia. So Alia has the same experience as a fetus, basically. So, there's this parallel of like, wisdom coming from before you're born.
In utero.
In utero, yeah.
Great album.
That's crazy, man.
This is the Dune universe for anyone who's not familiar. But yeah, that literally came to mind at the same time that you said it. I was like, oh, wow, that's so much like Alia. Or Alia or whatever.
If you've seen
the name is similar too. I'm sure he probably drew inspiration from that. He must have.
He must have.
If you've seen the David Lynch movie, she's the little girl that's like, my brother is coming.
Exactly. Grandfather.
My brother is coming. It's like a little weird cat girl.
She is a gom jabber.
She does have a gom jabber.
I'll tell you what, she got a gom jabber.
She done popped that fat man with that gom jabber.
Every time you guys say that, that's the voice that it conjures in my head.
She plumb clean popped him.
Them gom jabbers, that's some serious shit. Are we kind of done on Ania? Or
is there anything else to say about Ania?
I kind of feel like at this stage, there isn't a lot to say. I kind of feel like similar to book one of the 2-book Hyperion series, like book 1 setup and book 2 is kind of the rest. And I think it's similar here. So,
but I do have one thing really quick to say that this is another, as valiant of an effort as Victor Bavine put forth. There's something very bizarre about hearing a grown man try to do the voice of a little girl. It just doesn't settle well.
It's Victor
Bavine being the narrator of the audiobook here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. For all of you who listen to the audiobook. That's a toughie, man. We talked about this the other day, and you guys both agreed that it was weird, and it is weird, but he does a great job. I mean, it's tough for me. I'm biased. That's what I do. So to try to do 50 plus, 75 plus voices in a book, like that's a lot, man. And he does such a good job. So I'll forgive the weirdness of the girl voice.
I'm on your motorcycle, Benny, that I wasn't a huge fan, but I'm also kind of glad that we didn't have another Fabiana Mineta,
Oh no, yeah. I mean, this is just weird by the nature of it. I think he did a great job, as I stated. It's not a bad creative choice like Moneta, with,
Right.
No, I think, Ben, you'll appreciate this. You both will. I think it's more weird in the sense of, it was always Mark McKinney, Bruce McCullough, Kevin McDonald playing the women and Kids in the Hall. I still think he does a great job with it. I don't know how else they could have done it. They probably should have just hired a younger male actor or a female actor to do it. But either way,
Right. It's a valid gripes of Kev, Benny. I'm with you on that one.
oh, no doubt. I mean, look, I said at the beginning we are going to poke a little fun at some of the voices that Victor Bavine does in the read of the audiobook. It's not to take away from, his incredible reading of the story, because he does such a fantastic job.
But with or without the awkward voice work, I'll tell you something that was really awkward, and that's Rawl, the grown man, being told he's going to have a shower with an 11-year-old girl at one point. It was just the weirdest relationship there.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, but by the 11-year-old
Yeah, she's like, oh, one day we'll bathe together. But in the meantime, it's just like, oh my God, what?
I have no idea how I would react to that. I would probably be like, kid, you're crazy.
I still don't quite understand. The only thing I can come up with is because the book is a memoir written in a Schrodinger's cat box that he feels, and because a memoir you would be writing from the perspective of the future where you've evidently fallen in love with Aina as a grown woman. Like, of course you would write it in your journal, but it's just such a weird thing. I just don't understand why they couldn't just have written the book normal without any weird sexual stuff and then just gotten to that later, I don't know.
I don't know, man. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's almost an important story point if you're telling the story from the end of the story, right? So he's at the end in the Schrodinger cat box, and he's telling his story. And I think that from that point of view, saying, that she said that is not that big of a deal. And if you look at it in a different frame, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, sure. The way we started talking about it, it sounds weird. But if you think about it, a 12-year-old girl having a girl crush on an older man is not, it's not really weird at all. It's not uncommon either. You know what I mean? For her to say something like that is something that an awkward teen might say anyway,
Maybe.
And for him to just, he could be listening to that going, okay, she's got a little crush on me. All right, I get it, whatever, move on.
Cue the police.
That's fair enough. Yeah, right. I just call to question the necessity of,
yeah, that's how I feel,
of calling that into play before it actually happens later in the first place. I just think it was a bit of an awkward decision. There's the scene. So they're traveling in the consul's ship, and Ania decides to make a pool outside of the ship using gravity to sort of create a sphere of water, and she's swimming in weightlessness. And, she's described as being naked, and she's trying to get Rawl to come in with her. And there's just all this awkward, description that goes on around this thing. And I get the idea of making the 0G swimming pool thing. That's cool. But the fact that he had to add all that other stuff in there just seemed unnecessary. Just created an awkward feeling when reading it, this time around. It's well, all right. I mean, I'm not trying to be woke here. I just don't necessarily know what was necessary about that.
It didn't seem required. I get what you're saying, Kev, in terms of a potential, immature crush thing. Fine, that's reasonable enough. But in the grand scheme of the story itself, was it necessary? It totally reminded me of what?
Only in the sense that it gives the contrast between what is and what will become. And he's telling the story from the end of at the finish line.
Yeah, I get it. I just think I probably would have made a different choice if I were editing or writing it. But it reminds me.
Maybe Richard Simmons was like, Dan, I really think you should put this in there.
I don't think we can make Richard Simmons pedophilia jokes as part of the show.
I didn't say it's not a pedophilia joke.
Jesus Christ.
It'd be kind of.
I mean,
it could be misinterpreted
I
as
don't know.
one.
For me to second guess Dan Simmons because he's a terrific writer, but when I'm reading about Ania's 11-year-old butt cheeks looking like a couple of mushrooms or whatever and not being sexually attractive, like, I don't know why that was necessary at all.
All right, fair enough.
It kind of reminds me of Heinlein or whatever you say. Like Heinlein had a bunch of really weird sex stuff in a lot of his later books. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It didn't resonate. I didn't think it was necessary. It doesn't need to be dug into in any great detail, but it did remind me of how grossed out you were, Kev, of the over-the-top truck sleeping sequence. Like, I definitely got that vibe.
That was more overt, than this. This was like, eventually in the future, they become lovers. In Over the Top, there was no scenario where Lincoln Hawk and that kid were going to be lovers in the future. And there was no time travel. It wasn't even science fiction. It might have been science fiction in the sense that it was just completely bizarre, but that was never going to happen. The two of them bathing together in a zero-G sphere of brute cologne in the back of the truck was never in the cards, man.
Hey, her butt cheeks look like mushrooms.
Mikey, I don't have swim trunks. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to get naked and get in that pool with you. I don't know.
Can you imagine if that piece of shit truck was sentient like the ship, and there's Stallone being like, ship, can you extend a balcony out from the side of the truck while we're driving and then create a pool out of the brute cologne in the back that's like a bubble that we can swim in?
Because I kind of want to play a tune on the piano. I really want to see Sly serenading me at a Steinway with a giant sphere of zero-G water. That'd be amazing.
So okay, so just to make sure I got this right. You're swimming naked.
I'm Ania. I am a naked 11-year-old
in a zero-G sphere of brute cologne, and Stallone in the Lincoln Hawk gear with the hat turned backwards is serenading you on the piano.
He wraps both of his thumbs under in his hands and then plays with only 4 fingers each hand on the piano. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know. I just found it creepy, and I don't know. Whatever. We don't need to dwell on it.
It
was just fun.
I get it. I totally get it. Like, let's just, you know what? Hey, let's move on.
Okay. Sounds like a deal.
Is there more to say about Raul and Ania, or?
Yeah, that's what I meant, was let's move on from that weird part to talking about something that's actually interesting.
I feel like the relationship in terms of the Raul and Ania stuff also doesn't really get anywhere. It's really kind of the three of them coming together around the times that Raul gets injured. Like he gets injured on the ocean planet and then he goes hypothermic. And those are the two moments when the three of them really gel as a family, I suppose, for lack of a better term.
Well, sure. And it takes time for that to happen. But Benny, I think that in many ways I get, every time I listen to this or read it, I get but I get a little bit of a Leroy Jenkins feel to Endymion.
Totally.
He's always and I mean, this is directly related to their relationship because he feels like he's there to protect her. You know what I mean? So Silenus is like, oh, you need to go protect her and figure out all this other stuff. And that's what he thinks he's supposed to do. So he's always grabbing a gun and running into the room full of all the demons or whatever. You know what I mean? I feel like that's what he's always doing. And then, very much like Rick from Magnum, he kind of gets his ass kicked and then they have to bail him out. I mean, that's essentially what happens.
That's pretty much what happens every time.
Right? I mean, that's certainly what happens on Mare I when they're going on the ocean world. And then, kind of with Sol Draconi Septum as well, a little bit. He's just always like, all right, here I go. You stay here. You need to be protected. You stay here. I'm going to take my shotgun
Very much so.
and my flying belt. And I'm going to go in there. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get a hot bowl of oatmeal. And I'm gonna figure out what's going on here with these packs and the priests and all of that sort of thing, and then I'm gonna get back on that goddamn flying carpet, and I'm gonna swing back here. But you're gonna be okay.
I totally heard that impression falling apart, and I hoped you were gonna transition that one into a Brimley. That was great.
I just sort of it morphed very much like the ship does in the
Go.
story. So it was like, but that's how I feel. Like he's a lot of the time. I never commented on how great the Leroy Jenkins Rain of Fire meme was, Chad, that you posted on Instagram. I loved it. And that he's kind of like that. Don't you think, Ben? I mean, or both of you, whatever.
No question. Yeah. He's always running in with a barely half-baked plan and, just either not getting out or getting out by the skin of his teeth.
Or coming up with like a kind of a half-baked reason to go like investigate something, like
it kind of makes sense though, because I think he definitely has a solid case of imposter syndrome throughout. Like it's established early on that he's like, I'm in the room with these Shrike Pilgrim people that I learned about from my grandma or my mom or whatever. And so like he feels just like a schmuck. And so I think he kind of feels like he needs to put himself out there and take some risks,
He's definitely faking it until he makes it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
Definitely. I mean, I think his thing is that he's so kind of pure in many ways. There's a purity to him in that sort of girl next door, guy next door kind of way. You know what I mean? That's why he's there in essence, but
the Ocean World thing was a good example of that, where he circles back to save the dude that ends up stabbing him or whatever.
Yeah. But again, like I've read these stories so many times, right? And I still, for the life of me, like I was just doing my second listen through before we recorded this, and I got halfway through the book. So I was on, I think, 31 or 32, and they're just approaching the platform on Mare Eye, and I'm like, why is he going there? Like, I still don't get why he went out of his way to go to the platform in the first place. They're on a teeny little raft way out in the ocean, way far away from it. It's not like they were going underneath it. So I never really got why he felt the need to go there.
Yeah. I think it was just an action set piece, personally, but
he wanted to go to Gus's and get one of those burgers.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, I think any of us on a raft heading somewhere that you see that platform, you automatically think that they're going to see you, or something bad is going to happen. So I don't think it was unfounded for him to want to scout.
I guess.
But getting busted was not advisable.
Which he did in a very Leroy Jenkins kind of way.
Very much. I think a perfect Leroy Jenkins, though, is when they're on in the ice tunnels on Sol Draconi, and he goes to set charges by his lonesome, naked, into the freezing, icy cold water. And of course, he loses consciousness, and they have to revive. They have to pull him in and fucking revive him. And then afterwards, they do something with his comm bracelet, and he's like, "Oh, I guess we could have just done that."
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean.
I guess we could have just scattered it out with that first.
They did say like, oh, but the bracelet couldn't have set charges, but it is a great example.
Yeah, and that's also after, like, so he volunteers to go into the negative 50-degree water after he just got done barely recovering from 23 invasive surgeries on Hebron because of the bacteria that got in him on the ocean world.
I think it would be worth just a super quick interjection, because anyone that hasn't read this would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That after Ania and the gang escape DeSoya the first time, they blast their way through one of the old school Farcasters that haven't been in use for hundreds of years, and start a journey through a variety of Farcasters and go through a variety of worlds. So it's just worth chucking that in there for anyone who might not be following along.
Going from planet to planet. Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to get back to that in a second, because that's worth talking about for a minute. But yeah, so they're traveling through these various different worlds, as Chad said.
But yeah, he goes from one Leroy Jenkins to another for sure. No doubt.
So getting back, circling back on point like that, I brought that up because, that's what he thinks the relationship is at this point in the story, is that he's, supposed to protect this kid. And it's sort of the other way around almost. Like they're constantly protecting him and bailing him out and outthinking him. And, he's like, damn, better get the guns. And they're like, oh, we got to go, do this. He's like, I'm going to go chop some wood. What? I don't know. Whatever.
It kind of reminds me of we did The Boys season 2 recently, and it reminds me of Frenchie and Kimiko in a way, where like Frenchie's super protective throughout, and then towards the end, he's like, I realize that you don't need to be protected. It's like you know what's up, and you can take care of yourself in a way. Like it's definitely what you said, but I think it's also that he's being overly protective of someone who just. Be like, I can protect myself, Raul. Just stop doing dumb shit and almost dying, please. Thanks. In a way.
No. I'm with you, man. Anything else to add there before we move on? Because we need to move on.
Now let's start our journey down the river. Tethys, whatever the fuck it is.
The first world they enter, which we've already hinted at, as I was talking about it a minute ago, is Mare Infinitus, which...
Ocean planet.
You get a taste of... Yeah, it's the ocean planet. You get a taste of it from the first 2 books, and then we really get to kind of spend a little bit of time here. Is there any land on that planet? I'm always fascinated by worlds. Like when we talk about world building and I start reading stories like this, it's like I'm always fascinated by what other worlds would be like.
No doubt.
And this one is pretty cool.
If memory serves, the Mare Infinitus situation was there were like seaweed islands, living islands that were moved around by fucking dolphins or something. But
no, that's Maui Covenant.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm dead.
This one. You know what? That's our first death.
Totally a death. No, I've had some mispronunciation deaths. Yeah, you're right. That's Maui Covenant. I don't think Mare Infinitus had any then. I think it's just an ocean planet. But there's fishing platforms or oil platforms or whatever the fuck, and Raul gets sliced up. They make a joke about Salinas' old school Farcaster world, his old school Farcaster house.
Yes.
When he was the J.K. Rowling of the hegemony, and I really wanted him to... I wanted the raft to come through the Farcaster and not see anything other than a floating shitter platform. I think that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
I was talking about the worlds. I thought it was interesting. An ocean world I find very interesting. The purple water coming from the phytoplankton in the water. It was a pretty interesting little detail. And the rainbow sharks as well. But at any rate, they transit...
There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, but,
Yeah, and there's plenty of interesting stuff that happens that's not worth us talking about for you folks at home. You either read the story or you didn't.
And if you haven't, check it out.
I enjoyed Victor Bevin's interpretation of the dialect of the platform dwellers.
That was noteworthy.
Sort of like northern Midwest crossed with maybe Scottish or something along those lines. It was an interesting interpretation. Good on Victor Bevin.
Yeah, it was. It was similar to the plantation dudes that the consul runs afoul of in the Fall of Hyperion when he's going to get the ship.
Right. Those gentlemen, yes. So they transit from Mare I to Hebron, and Raul, of course, gets bitten by one of the sharks and contracts this insane sort of viral fungus inside of his rib cage. And when they transit to the next world, it is completely devoid of life. It's Hebron, which is in essence, the Jewish world.
Yeah. And by devoid of life, you mean like abandoned like a ghost town, but everything else is still kicking around.
Well, exactly.
Yes.
Like, according to what they knew, Hebron was a world in the Pax that had not accepted the cruciform and all of that good stuff. And they get there, and it's been deserted for what they figured was a couple of weeks. Not years, not months.
There's like food on plates and stuff in buildings, yeah.
Right, exactly. And not desiccated food either. So
yeah.
He gets himself patched up in the hospital there, and then basically we move on.
Essentially, yeah. They see the Shrike or think they see the Shrike, but it's not super relevant. Then they pass through
Wait, one little thing that I just wanted to say that I thought was extremely funny was when he's talking about the Ultramorph in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I literally would have put the gun to the kid's head if I thought she could have brought me more Ultramorph.
But I knew they wouldn't give in. Yeah, that was funny.
Anyway, go ahead.
So then they transfer from him recovering in the surgery to the ice planet, which is it's a pretty heavy duty opening thing where they just like pass through this teleportation portal and they're like inside of a fucking iceberg or like a frozen river where there's just huge ice caves and masses of fast moving water and they're stuck. Like you realize pretty freaking quick that you're dead.
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, to me about Sol Draconis Septum was that, it's a high G world and it's the atmosphere that's ice, not that the surface of the planet is necessarily cold. There is a difference there and is covered with water. So in the hegemony days, it was terraformed and then there was a tunnel through it. Or rather parts of it were terraformed and there was a tunnel through it where people on the Tethys would, could go down the river and they could see, the Arctic wraiths and that sort of stuff. But it's like since the fall of, the hegemony, it's like the atmosphere has been creeping back in and the planet has gone native almost again, which I thought was pretty cool. So that's why the tunnel was so completely claustrophobic.
The next move is them getting themselves out of that problem.
Which we already talked about with Rawl doing his, we could have sent the bracelet instead moment.
Yeah, they just put some explosives and get themselves 100 meters further down the cave and then backtrack and find another cave system. And that's when we meet the...
Do it, Ben.
Cobra La-la-la-la-la-la-la-la.
Cobra La's. That's it. I've been waiting all week for that one thing.
The Chichitech.
The Indigenes, very interesting, like a similarity to Eskimos in many ways. People that, they live in extreme cold and they basically get everything they need from one animal. There's no plant life to speak of. They get everything from the Arctic wraiths.
Your mentioning of the atmosphere being frozen, I kind of either glossed over or missed, but being a frozen atmosphere, that means there's, quite literally no rocks of any kind, no anything of any kind. So it's ice and wraiths and there's nothing else. This is super interesting.
Well, and how they have to melt the water. They have to melt the ice to breathe.
Right.
Like once they get into the tunnel system, I think I'm remembering that right. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. When they go onto the surface, they need to do that. Yeah. No, that's super interesting.
And then the tunnels themselves that the Chitatuk are, sort of traversing through are the ones made by the baby Arctic wraiths, sort of boring through the ice. I think it's the babies. But just again, a really great, series of description from Dan Simmons. And then we eventually meet another very interesting priest, which is Father Glaucus, and somebody else can talk about that.
I kept thinking Father Glaucoma.
Well, it's pretty fitting, right, Ben?
Yeah, no, I thought that name was a little on the nose for, a blind priest.
Okay.
I know, right?
Sometimes you run short of names, I guess. I like that idea of him kind of hanging out in the upper levels of a skyscraper that's been abandoned and he's on his own, and it's pretty cool.
The cool thing about this story, one of the cool things about this story, there's many, is, the action is not necessarily the what of what's going on. We really get to more of the meat in the next book, but the conversations that they have in these interludes, like when they have all the ship time before they get to Parvati and Renaissance V, and the times when they're on the raft and on the hawking mat, like on Mare Infinitus, and when they're talking with Father Glaucus, and they're really sort of going around the horn about debating various different things about religion, spirituality, Catholicism, all that sort of stuff. That's sort of the nut of it, I think, in many ways.
You end up with kind of a Huckleberry Finn vibe on the raft where they're just shooting the shit and traveling down the river kind of thing, for sure. I think what I liked most about Sol Draconis Septum, the Ice Planet, was how the story there was, maybe it's all of them, like how each of the planets had their own, like, it was like a little capsule, like each had a little story, like it was like a series of short stories in a way. And I really liked how this one brought the Chichita indigenes in, the world building of the planet and the atmosphere, like you said, and then you've got the Pax priest who's stuck in a skyscraper, et cetera, and the way that the characters interact with him and the environment is all really cool, and you can kind of leave it there, but then they add that final layer of Nemes coming in, this new character that just like lays waste to everything, and it just kind of ups the ante, and you kind of maybe don't know it at the time, but it's clearly kind of the transition to the third act where like the big final battle is going to happen with Nemes, you know. So I just liked I liked her as kind of like the oh shit moment at the end of this particular story, this world.
Well, yeah, and they told it the way Dan Simmons writes it. It's, you know, sort of out of sequence. Sometimes he's telling Destroyer's perspective first, and then Ania and Rawls' perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite constant in the book, which works.
No, it works fantastic. I'm just saying, I think in that particular part, it was like we jumped to the whole Nemes part, and that bit of the mystery starts unraveling. And I just wanted to add to what you were saying, Chad. Like, there's also a lot of great, you know, again, like I mentioned, I love the worlds and finding out about the worlds, and they do a great job of sort of describing each one of the worlds and certain things that go on there, or the characteristics of the people there, or whatever. And I really enjoy that. I also, you know, like on Hebron, we get another kind of little side mystery, you know, that he kind of just plunks in there. That's like, oh, well, where did all the people go? You know, and then there's so many other interesting things going on. Like we're about to transit, and you know, you start getting into like the ice, and there's a whole like situation, and there's tension there. And then we move right into the Nemes thing on God's Grove, and you forget about that, you know, but then that plays another huge part later, which is great. So he's kind of, you know, dropping in these little pebbles of these mysteries on these various different worlds as well, you know, like other parts of the mystery rather. So
no, I'm with you. It kind of, that comment fits with what I was saying about the series of short stories. Like, it's a series of short stories, but there's like quite a bit of weaving in between them all for sure, and little hints here and nuggets there. So yeah, I agree. It's masterful storytelling. It keeps you engaged, even though there's a lot going on. I meant to say this earlier when you mentioned the comm log being thrown under the water, but the comm log kind of gives me like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy vibe, where like the ship and the comm log are totally like the guide and Marvin. You know, I think that's really a funny crossover.
Well, they've got the book as well. You know, they find the book in the library that's the Traveler's Guide to the Tethys.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate in the audiobook they keep saying the Tethys.
Yeah, same.
I've seen that word before, and I've always heard it as Tethys. So I don't
want to be like that guy, but I kind of feel like there were a handful of mispronunciations. That's funny. There's the handful of mispronunciations.
I just mispronounced mispronunciation.
You know what? That right there is a very special death.
But it makes me feel a lot better about how I mispronounce all the names in my brains when I'm reading the book, because I feel like there was certainly a few sprinkled throughout.
No doubt about that. I agree with you.
It just makes me way more willing to just like not worry about it and just blast through it.
It's just part of your Aiua, Chad.
It's my Aiua, dude, all the way. Say Aiua one more time.
This is super nerd, but I'm going to say it anyway. There was one point where there was diving happening into water, and Victor Bevine, the narrator for the audiobook, says something like, Ania doved back in. And I was like, did he just say doved?
Doved.
What was the word you made up earlier? I think we're all on the same motorcycle here. We're all in the mispronunciations / made up words motorcycle.
What was that word? I
don't remember. It was funny though.
Good God.
It's in reference to Father Captain Besoya.
It was. Can't remember. It doesn't matter. Well, I'll remember it next week when I listen to this episode.
There you go.
You can just insert it there.
All right. So moving right along, let's talk about the Nemes character for a minute.
Yep.
I think that Dan does a great job of introducing the character. So we lose Redig, and then we come to find out later from Gregorius that he knows a guy that saw Redig. So he was alive after they had been told that he was dead. So we've got, you know, this sort of sinister behind the scenes mystery is brewing and brewing and brewing, right, throughout the course of the book. And then we get Nemes as the new crew member, and he does a great job of describing her doing all of these things without really revealing what she is and where she's from, because he's holding that
and that she's unlike Destroyer and the crew. Yeah.
Yeah, he's holding back that reveal for us until I don't really the next book, I think, right?
Well, the final battle really.
Or the final battle, do we do?
Oh no, it says specifically that she's not human at one point in this book. Definitely.
Yeah, they definitely give away her origin.
Okay, so we know that she's an entity of the core, because I know that he was really clever in holding that back, and I just can't remember if he drops the fact that the core is still around in this story or in the next one, because in the next one they're all over the place.
No, they reveal it in this one.
So I think he does a great job of holding back that information sort of until the last minute, so it really builds the suspense nicely and the intrigue as well, because you're just like, who is this person who has all of these abilities and is able to do all of this stuff? And she's got the total James Bond gear disguised as other shit.
Yeah.
Like the Tic Tacs and the tampons.
And the old football fucking video
and
game.
And the dental
whatever.
floss is like the super high tensile garrote wire. Like it was great.
Totally.
What'd you say, Chad? Sorry.
Just like the old school fucking Atari football game that like doubles as like a supercomputer or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You mean the handheld Yahtzee?
Yeah, I was just like, exactly. I just feel like the bleep bloops. It's a bleep bloop. She's got a bleep bloop that becomes a supercomputer. It's just so funny.
Oh, God, dude. I could not stop thinking about that the other day for some stupid reason.
I love a good bleep bloop.
Yeah, so Radamanth Nemes is fucking scary, man.
Totally.
Super scary.
Fucking conniving and arrogant and just... Malevolent, yes. Toxic even.
Stormfront even.
Total Stormfront.
Very, very, yeah, very much so. The Shrike is a scary character, but it's kind of like the Terminator, whereas, there's something scary about something that doesn't have any remorse or any emotional connection to the killing that they're doing. There's a different level when you're talking about something that seems to thrive and enjoy.
Ugh, totally.
The carnage.
Yeah.
Without being psychotic.
Yeah.
Also that the Shrike, as we know now, is based on Fedman Kassad. So at the heart of the Shrike is a once great man with honor. This creature is just... I couldn't wait for her to go from second one. I was like, I can't wait to see her get hers, man.
I have to say, I like the setup of, they set her up and she establishes herself quite quickly as somebody that is just like, amoral and doing really horrible stuff. And, because of the fact that they're going to run into Ania and crew, you're like, oh, the Shrike's going to fuck her up. And I love how she's just like, I look forward to seeing the Shrike. I'm going to completely blast that thing. And so, like, it twists it on its head and makes it real clear real quick that, like, the Shrike isn't going to save the day like he has in every other kind of situation. And I enjoyed that, how they set that up.
I enjoyed that as well. And I also enjoyed how she starts referring to the Shrike for the first time in a way implying that he's obsolete.
Yeah.
And it's like you're so used to the Shrike from the other two stories being this incredible, all-powerful killing machine that can travel through time and slow time down and is basically indestructible. And then you've got this other creature, and you're like, oh, wait a second. What's going to go down now?
It very much has that T2 Arnold versus the T-1000 thing, for sure.
Totally.
Literally in all of its chrome-covered glory.
Well said.
Yeah, she's a fucking abomination,
Yeah.
And her kind is an abomination, much like they, would call a cybrid an abomination, but like really.
Truly in the truest sense of the word, yes. So,
and the Catholic Church is employing these fucking things.
Yeah.
Again.
I know.
So.
But again, and the storytelling is like, the church is the bad guy in the story, and Destroyer is kind of the person who's been ordered to carry out the task. And in a way, having Destroyer as the quote unquote bad guy for 2/3 of the book is a great way to make the Nemes character come into the remainder of the story to kind of make the bad guy actually bad now, you know? If it was just like a constant Nemesis chase the whole way through, it would have gotten really boring really quickly. So it was a clever way to shift gears.
Agree. And also, I really, and again, it really just showcases what a cool character Destroyer is. Like, he notices that one minor thing, the coffee bulb.
Yep.
Being out of place by a quarter of an inch, and that's what gets his mind going, you know, and then he does all of that sleuthing around, you know, and starts to figure it out and get Gregorius and Key in on it. Just, I love the way that whole sequence played out, you know.
Yeah.
And then how they figured it out, and then, you know, that's where his, you know, sort of his real moral compass kicks in. I mean, real in the sense that the church is so full of shit, and he's an actual, you know, good person, and he's like, this is wrong, you know, and
he acts against the church for the first time.
Yeah, and they lance her, man, and like put her into the rock like 5 meters. Just, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, super cool. Well, man, that might be a good transition to God's Grove and the final battle.
We're already kind of there, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, there you are.
There you are.
Here we are. So she tricks. So like she's a crew member on Destroyer's ship, and the way that the cruciform works, as you may recall, mirrors the 3 days that it took for Jesus to come back to life. So it takes 3 days to recover from death with a cruciform, whereas she's not human. Therefore, she just like wakes straight up, and she has 3 days to cause trouble while the other humans are being put back together. So over the course of a couple of these worlds, she does a variety of mischievous things to try and catch and kill Alia. And it leads up to this final battle where she knows they're going to God's Grove by monofilament tapping into the Ice World's Farcaster after killing everybody. And finds out they're going to God's Grove, which is the old tree world from the first couple of books. At Mastine's place. What were they called? The Templars? Yeah, the Templar world.
Yes.
And they call it like the stump or whatever, the world stump now.
Well, the stump of the world tree.
Kind of dark.
Because the world tree was the largest tree on the planet, again, which I thought was just insanely cool, with a base diameter of, I think, a kilometer or something nuts like that. I think, yeah, it reached all the way up to the upper atmosphere. It was so damn big. And of course, they cut it down for firewood.
As you do.
Sorry. It was so stupid.
They made pencils out of it.
There you go. Oh my God. And that's where this section of the Tethys goes around, is the stump of the world tree.
But she finds out where they're going. They're there, and the world was destroyed by the quote unquote ousters in the other book, which was a bait and switch where the core actually blew everything up, but sets up a bunch of like weird James Bond weapons and monofilament line, like you mentioned earlier, and waits for the rafty crew to come down the river.
And then the battle ensues, and then she gets lanced into the rock.
Babadi Babadai loses an arm, which is pretty interesting. I thought it was a first time that a non-Rawl character gets their shit pushed in.
Yeah, no, that was a really intense part, you know, and very, very cool. And there was a couple of points in there I was like, again, Dan Simmons, like, I didn't know what was going to happen, you know, the way he writes it. I was just like, are they actually going to die here?
Dude, that monofilament shit is scary, man. Like, that would just be terrifying.
Oh, my God. Super scary.
I've always had a fascination with that tech in a variety of... I think I probably first encountered it in cyberpunky novels or whatever, but it's just such a crazy idea.
Johnny Mnemonic, the baddie, has that fingernail.
Yes, exactly.
Monofilament Garrote that,
Yeah.
Talk about an A+ film, hey?
Talk about scary, man. All that stuff was super scary.
And her way that she was going to defeat the Shrike, like they have a big Shrike fight, and then
she's going to send it into the future.
Slaps him into the future 5 minutes or something. That was really interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. And then also, I thought it was interesting how she starts describing the power and the energy that some of these things that she's doing require, you know, and how, you know, just jogging on the surface of Sol Draconi's septum in fast time, would power an entire planet for a year or something crazy like that, So, sort of going back to world building and tech and all that sort of thing, I mean, they're sort of drawing on energy directly from the void which binds, I'm assuming, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. What do you think about that? Yay, nay?
Yeah, I agree, and will echo the love for the world building. Like, there's so many layers to this guy's storytelling that he said it well.
I know. Right on. All right, what else do we need to touch on here? Because we're kind of at the end.
I think we're at the end, actually. I mean,
she gets lanced and buried into the rock, right?
Yeah, which is pretty cool, man, by DeSoya.
Right. DeSoya comes around. They lance her from orbit. Go ahead, Ben.
Father Captain DeSoya to the rescue was pretty awesome. And it's sort of where, Ania invites him to join them on their journey. And, he's like, I would, but, I'm a member of the church and I have to go take my lashings or whatever, So it's sort of like a reconciliation between them. We're talking about how he's dreaming that, she's his daughter and, the connection between them. This is sort of like the culmination of that in this book anyways.
Yeah, definitely. It's like another shift of gears and another example of him being pious to the point where he like goes against the church, and instead of joining her, he's like, I'm going to go back and tell the church what I did so that I can be punished. Like, it's a super interesting way to shift into the next phase of the story for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Of course he's like, I'm going to go tell the truth. Like, yeah, great idea.
He has to.
But he kind of like, if I remember correctly, he's like, hey gang, Reddick or whatever, whoever's still key or whoever's still kicking around, let's go to Patcham and figure out what the hell this Nemes thing was about, because that was fucked up. Like, he's going to go and just be like, what the hell, guys? And I appreciate that. I appreciate that he's just like, no fucks given. He's just like, I'm going to go and figure out what this immoral bullshit was, because that's not what I signed up for. And it's just like, yeah, fair enough, dude. Like, it's another example of how he's a good dude.
Well, there's just a lot of layers, and it's yet another layer, man, in the story as well, so...
But lots of characters in his shoes would run away, and he's just, like, not running away, which I appreciated.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. On that. It's a great character building, again.
You're about to say something, Benny?
No, it's sort of like the start of his redemption,
Yeah, definitely.
Because eventually... Well, I'm not going to say that.
And
Nope.
Nuggets test ratings?
No.
And then we're off to see Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Final teleportation to Old Earth.
Well, I think it was cool quickly that they, as a gift of good faith, they said, take the drop ship, and then got Abe Bennick in the auto dock and the drop ship, and, they end up at Falling Water, which is just like super cool.
Pretty cool. It's a cool building.
They reached their destination. Yay.
Cliffhanger to the next book. It leaves enough things up in the air to keep you interested to check out the next one.
It does, and I can't wait to get into that, which we will do.
Dan Simmons is really good at covering the story with no details missed, and always setting up something yet to come. To
hook you.
Yeah, always.
Sweet. Nuggets test ratings.
Got no nuggets.
I got one nugget that the 379 foot tall sequoia tree in California that's thought to be the oldest tree in the world, of around 600 years, maybe to 800 years old, is named Hyperion.
What? Really?
Yeah. It was found in 2006, so it might have been named based on the book, or I have no idea. But the oldest tree in the world, location unknown because no one wants to give the location away because of Instagram dickheads, is called Hyperion. I thought it was cool.
That is very cool.
That is cool.
Not a book nugget, but an interesting nugget.
No, it's a really interesting tie-in with a lot of things in these stories, man. Well done.
Deaths, I had plenty of mispronunciation deaths, and Benny, I think you didn't die again, man. You like say Matrix or something.
No, I didn't die either. You confused Maui Covenant for Mare Infinitus, and I nerded you out, and you died. And then you mispronounced many things, died every single time, and then you mispronounced.
I mispronounced.
The culmination, exactly. The culmination was you mispronouncing the word mispronounce,
which is pretty meta. That's pretty awesome. That should have been like I should have gotten like an extra life for that.
Oh, I think that's a one-up moment, dude.
Yeah.
I think we all suffered a mispronunciation death at one point or another in this.
Fair enough. In honor of narrator Victor Bavine, we all had a mispronunciation death at some point.
Yeah. You were, I think, on the mispronunciation death, Chad. You were given the sacrament of resurrection.
There you go. That's it. I've got a cruciform.
You're all pink and fleshy right now.
I've always been pink and fleshy, Benny.
Well, look, we're going to come over and give you some broth, so you're going to feel better.
There you go. And I'll weep.
I've always been pink and fleshy. That's great.
Gentle sobbing in my arms.
As far as ratings go, we don't rate books, but I'll just say for the record, if
masterpiece,
you're listening to this and haven't read it, read these books. And if you have read or listened to them, I hope you enjoyed them because we think these are some of the best books ever.
And we hope you enjoyed this episode as well, folks. Thank you for tuning in for this, our third in our book club series. And I will end the show with one of my favorite quotes from this book, which was the toast of Martin Cypenus to heroes who get their hair cut.
Hey.
So long, folks.
See ya.
Later.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you would like to support this show, folks, you can do so in many great ways. First, you can rate us and review us. You can also tell a friend to check out the show. You can even listen to the show with a friend and hold hands. That might be fun. You can find us on social media with the handle @EBD Podcast. We spend a lot of time on Instagram lately talking. Please come over, join in on the conversation. You can find the show notes for this episode in your podcast app of choice or on our website, ebd.fm/episodes/84. Thanks so much for joining us on this, our third of the book club series, folks. And stay tuned for the finale, part 4 of our book club series, which should be coming sometime in the new year. So look for that. Thanks so much, folks, and we'll see you next time.
Hey guys, I just got done with my interval training. Can I cool down on the raft? Is that cool? Or
what if I just stand here? I weigh a ton. I mean, I hope that's all right, but
no, I mean like a literal ton.
Yeah, I'm trying to shed some pounds, but I just can't.
You guys might want to all group on the other side of the raft so we don't tip over. I mean,
just kind of even it out. I think that's how they do it.
I don't know, starboard side or whatever. I can always get them backwards.
Is it the left or the right side?
I don't know.
The future right is left and left is right, so I get a little confused when I come back in time.
Okay, I'm a dyslexic, guys. I'm dyslexic, okay?
I'm just like, can one of you guys make me a smoothie?
I've got this thing of pea protein, but I can't reach it. I just punch holes in the bottle all the time.
Actually, if you guys could just put all the fruit and stuff into a vessel, I can actually blend it up really well. I
mean, there you go.
My middle name is Vitamix.
Oh my God, that's funny. My middle name is Vitamix. What's his last name?
Shrike,
Vitamix Smith.
I kind of feel like it's the Vitamix Shrike.
Wait, what is that?
Everyone calls him Shrike, people call me Walsh. So his actual first name is and so it's the Vitamix Shrike, maybe.
His first name is the.
Oh, that's funny, man. Holy shit.
Good stuff right there.